Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about methods. Think of a method as an enclosed group of statements that do something, perform an operation. So with methods, we can pass in parameters or values, and then they return something back to us. That could be a value as well. So it turns out you've actually been using methods for a while now. You just didn't know that. Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, now let's get started with methods or functions. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to right click and create a new project, Java project. I'm going to call it Java Methods. Let's go ahead and just say finish. Let's go to source and create a package, com.javaprograms.java methods, and click finish. And inside we're gonna go ahead and create a class. Gonna call methods and finish. Now, so how do we do these method things, these functions? Well, you notice here we actually have already this main method here we always talked about. For the longest time we've been using this, but we never really talked more about it. Well, this is a method. This is how a method looks like. Except this is a main entry of our class methods in this case. So, how do we create our own method? Very simple. We go outside of this method here, go outside of that and say public static void my method and parentheses. And then we're going to put curly braces to say that this is our method. This is our method. So we can put all the statements we want. Now let's go ahead and say system.out.println and again say, hey, hello from my method. Let's see what's going to happen. Save that and run. As you can see, this means it's running and it's terminated, and we see nothing here. What's going on? Well, we have a problem here. Yes, we did declare our my method, and we have a body and says hello for my method, but it's not working. The reason being is because we need to call that method into our main entry point here, main function. Because if we don't call it, well, it's going to say, I don't know what to do. Yes, you wrote a method, but you're not calling me. Okay, so how do we call methods? Very simple. Well, as you can see, all of our methods have their own names. This one is my method. So if we just go my method, and then you have parentheses like this, that's how we call it. Now let's save and go run and see what's going to happen. And there you have it, hello from method. So this method we just created is now being called in our main entry point, in our main function. Now let's go ahead and say, well, I wanted to create a method that add two numbers. How are we going to go about doing that? Very simple. What we can do, we can pass inside this method variables of certain type. And then we can take those variables inside our method body here and do all the operations we want. So that when we call this method in main, it's going to give the results that we're expecting. And if we want to pass in more than one parameter, we go comma and then int b. Notice right away the method that we just called is saying, oh, something is right. The reason being is because, well, now we're saying something has to be passed inside this for this to work. So now that we have passed an int a and an int b, let's see what we're going to do with those two variables that we passed, or values that we've passed in. Well, let's create another variable inside here that will hold our result. So we're going to say int result is equal to 0. Set it to 0 for now. And now we're going to say result is equal to a, so this first one that we've passed in, plus b, this b here that we passed in. Print out our result and say my result is, then we take this result here because it's holding a plus b, the final summation, the final, because it's holding a plus b value, we're going to then print that out here. So say result. Get rid of that. Well, we still have a problem here saying, well, something is not right. Well, the reason why is because, well, now that we have a contract that we say this method, my method, has to have a variable of type integer and another one of type integer as well. So two variables we need to pass in here. So what we want to do here, we can say 5 because that's an integer, and then comma. So that 5 is going to be, it's this b, a here. And then let's see 5, another 5, which is going to be b. Now it says, oh, great, because as you see, it's supposed to have two arguments here, and there are. We've passed in 5 and 5 because they're type of int and integer. So if we save this and run, we should get my result is 10. Wonderful. So as you can see, there's a lot of things you can do. It's very, very powerful to create methods, because then we can encapsulate, we can put together a group of statements, a group of things that want to be done, and then we can just call it whatever we want to call that method, and then results will show up. Now, this is what they call a void method. A void method essentially means it returns nothing. Okay, it has no return. Now, there are times when you want to return something, a particular type of variable. So how do you do that? So what do you do? Let's go back and create a function that returns something. In this case, it's going to be returning an integer. So you can say public static int, and you can say multiply, and then let's pass in int number 1, and then another one int number 2. Now you notice right away Eclipse is telling us something is not right here, because it's saying, well, you are of type int. This function multiplies of type int, therefore it will always have to return a type int. And to let our function know, or Java know, that this is a return type, we actually have to say return 0, for instance. You just have to return something. Well, in this example, nothing's really going to happen. It's going to return 0. We want to be able to multiply these two numbers that we pass in and return the result. So what do we do again? We do the same thing. We can say int result is equal to 0, and then we're going to say result is going to be equal to number 1, again, what are we passing here? Number 1 times number 2. So we're multiplying these two numbers here and take the value and put into result, and then we can return result. Control save, and there you go. Now, if we wanted to then call this function here in our main to see what it's going to do, let's comment this out here so that we don't have a lot going on. Let's call this one is called what? Multiply. Let's call it multiply. Multiply, and then we have to pass in something, otherwise we're going to have trouble here. We're going to say, well, you told me that when you define this, it's supposed to have two arguments. It's supposed to have two parameters here, but putting anything here, so you have to put something there. Let's say 3, 5. Let's see what's going to happen. Save and run. Now you may see, well, so what's going on? I mean, I did everything that we're supposed to do. I called the function inside of our main entry here, main function, and then I pass in 3 and 5. I don't get it. So why isn't that working? It is working. It's just that not showing you anything here, because we're just returning a result. We're not actually systeming that out. We're not printing it out. One of the things that we can do with a return, something that that's actually being returned by a function, in this case an integer, what we can do, we can actually go here and say system.out.println and say, let's say a text we want to show also. We can say, this is my other result. And then we can actually, this is great, pass in this whole statement here, this whole function call with parameters. We can say multiply, and then pass in 3 and 5. Let's do it like that. And it will work. Because remember here, what are we doing here? We're just returning a result, which is number 1 times number 2. So it's just a value. It's pretty much the same as saying, if I were to say int d is equal to 0, and then take that d and pass it in here. D. It is the same thing, except here we're getting that value from our function because we wanted to go ahead and create all of this multiplication. So let's go back to multiply 3 and 5. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's get rid of this. That's just an example. All right, let's see what's going to happen. Excited? Yes, let's go and run. This is my other result, 15, because 3 times 5 is 15. That's great. Now you can see the power of functions. We just create an isolated piece of code that we can pass in values and get results from it so that we don't have to write everything in the main in one place. And we can call this as many times as we want. If we want to call the same function in parameters, we can say again system.out.println result. We can go ahead and say multiply again. Let's say we want to see what's 4 times 9. Let's save that. Go ahead and run. There. So as you can see again, you can go ahead and make as many calls and change all the values that we're passing in, and it will always work. Now let's go ahead and dissect our function here, what all these keywords mean. A public, it's part of a modifier, public and static. And then we have this one here, which is a void in this case, which means it's called the return type. What is the function going to return? If it's a void, as you know, it's not going to return anything per se. It will run whatever it's inside, but it's not going to return anything. And then we have a name. This we can put whatever we want. In this case, we call it my method, and here we call it multiply. And then we can add as many parameters as we want here. We just added 2, but we can add 20, 50, hundreds. Now in this one, we have the same thing. We have this modifier here, which is public static, which means this one is a public. It can be accessed from anywhere, this function here. We will talk more about what public means. And then we have an int. This is a type. This is the return type of this function here that we created called multiply. This function here will always have to return an integer. If we wanted to return, let's say, a double, we go like that, a double. If you want to return a float, we go float. If you want to return a string, guess what? We're going to do like a string. This is very important here because it tells the function, it's a contract that you're writing and agreeing with, saying, I will always return this type. Inside our body here, we do our multiplication and we take that result and we return the value so we can use it. So wonderful. Good job. See you in the next video.